Projects need resources to get work done, like people, equipment, materials, and money. You can create resources up front in project or whenever you realize you need them. The resource sheet is the best place for creating resources. To display it, let's go to the View tab and then in the ribbon in the Resource Views section, click Resource Sheet. That displays a table with fields related to resources. We're going to start with work resources. These are resources you assign by time, like the people you assign by the hour or day, and equipment you rent for a week. As far as naming these resources, you have two options. You can fill in people's names, or you can use generic skills. In this example, I'm going to use skills. You can always replace them with the people later. I'm going to add in the first name. So I type in the name and then press Tab, which takes me to the Type field. Project automatically creates a work resource, so I don't have to change that. If you want to track cost, the next thing to do is to fill in the standard rate field. This is the cost per time frame. So I'm going to add in $200 per hour. Now let's add another resource. This one I call construction. It's also a work resource, so I don't have to change the type. But I'm going to go to the standard rate and let's put in $400 per hour for this. If you're going to add people's names, it's easier to find them if you use the format of last name, first name, with no commas or brackets or anything like that. So I'm going to type in one name as an example. I type it in and press Tab to go to the type field. So now I have a resource, Doe John, and it's a work resource. With work resources, availability is defined by two fields, the maximum units and the calendar. Maximum units represents the percentage of time the resource is available to the project. The program automatically fills in 100%. That means the resource is dedicated to the project. On the other hand, the calendar is the working days and times from the project calendar, unless you define specific resource calendars. In this case, we're using the standard calendar, Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day. Now let's go to material resources. These are things like lumber, hardware, and gasoline. On this project, we have materials, we have cables that we need for the equipment. So I'm going to name the resource cable. When I tab over into the type field, Project sets it to work, but this is a material resource. I can type the letter M and Project will change it to material for me. When I tab into the next field, this is the material label field. This is a reminder to you of what the unit of measure is. So in this case, each cable has a cost. So I'm going to type in each. Then I go to the standard rate field and I add what the price is for each cable. And let's say that that's $80. Finally, we're going to add one last resource, which is a cost resource. This project requires a permit. So I type in that name and then tab into the type field. I type the letter C to change to cost. Now remember, cost resources are financial costs like travel and fees. So when I press Tab to get out of the type field, you'll notice that I don't have to fill in a standard rate. That's because you fill in the amount when you assign the resource to a task. That's all you have to do to create resources in Project. The exercise files include a list of resources for the lab project. Go ahead and add the remaining resources to your project file. As you assign resources to tasks, Project's scheduling engine uses task dependencies, resource assignments, calendars, and more to calculate when tasks will start and finish. To assign resources, we're going to use the Gantt chart. On the View tab, you can click the top half of the Gantt chart button. For simple assignments, you can add resource names in the Resource Names column. The first thing I'm going to do is widen this table so I can see the full Resource Names column. To do that, I'm going to point at this vertical divider, and when I see the two-headed arrow, I can drag to the right. Let's start with Task 2, Review Design. I'm going to click the resource name cell for this task, then click the down arrow, and I want to add the diagnostic lead physician and construction. So I turn on the checkboxes for those resources and then press enter. You can see the resource names over in the timescale next to the taskbar. Project assigns them at full units, 100%. Now let's click the resource name cell for task 3. I'm going to click the down arrow and I'm going to assign hospital procurement. So I turn on that checkbox and press enter. We're going to do the same thing to assign logistics to task 4. I click the down arrow, turn on the checkbox for the resource that I want, and press enter. There's another way to assign resources, and that's with the task form. To display the task form, we're already on the View tab. So we're going to head over to the Split View section and turn on the checkbox next to Details. That displays the task form in the bottom half of the window. This task form lets you adjust assignments, so you could use partial units or specify the work hours and make other changes. I'm going to select Task 6, Inspect Equipment, up in the Gantt chart. When I do that, the information for that task appears in the task form in the bottom. So now let's go ahead and assign resources to this task. Down in the task form, I'm going to click the first resource name cell. Then I'll click the down arrow and choose Diagnostic Lead Physician. I also want to assign the MRI vendor. So I'm going to click the next resource name cell, click the down arrow, and choose that resource. When I click OK, notice that Project assigns both of these resources at 100%, but you can also see the work hours. Because we're using the standard calendar, a one-day task will have 8 hours of work for each resource. Now let's select Task 7 up in the Gantt chart. Down in the task form, I'm going to assign construction to this task. I also need material resources for this task, cables for the equipment. So I'm going to click the next resource name cell, click the down arrow, and choose cable. To specify the quantity for the cables, I'm going to go to the units field and I'll type the quantity. Let's say that it's 5. Now when I click OK, you can see that Project assigns 100% for the work resource and 8 hours of work, and you can see 5 each in the units and work fields for the material resources. We're going to add one more resource to this task, and that's a cost resource, the permit. So I'm going to click the down arrow and choose that resource and click OK. The permit is a cost resource, so I have to add the cost now that I've assigned it. Well, there's no way to do that in this table, but I can change the table that appears in the task form. So I'm going to right-click and choose Cost. Now, in the Cost field for Permit, I can put in the value of the permit and click OK. Notice that Project calculates the costs for the work and material resources based on the standard rates that we've added to those resources. That's a quick overview of assigning resources to tasks. The exercise files include a list of assignments for the rest of the tasks. For practice, add those assignments to your project file. To build a realistic schedule, you need to keep your team members busy without assigning them too many simultaneous tasks. That's why you need to find and resolve resource overallocations. The first thing I'm going to do here is on the View tab in the Split View section, I'm going to turn off the Details checkbox. That way I can see my project in the entire window. Now the next thing I need to do is change one of Project's settings. To do that, I'm going to head to the Resource tab. Over on the right end in the Level section, I'm going to click Leveling Options, and that opens the Resource Leveling dialog box. By default, Project is set up to look for overallocations on a week-by-week basis. That gives more time for overallocations to work themselves out. But this is a fairly short project, so what I'm going to do is click the down arrow and change this to day by day, and then click OK. Notice over in the indicators column, when I do that, I see these little red people icons. That's an indication that the resources on these tasks are overallocated. If you point at the icons, you'll see the note that tells you that. To get an idea of where these overallocations are coming from, I'm going to use a different view. So let's go to the View tab, and then in the Resource Views section, click Resource Usage. This shows resources and the tasks assigned to them. Now, the first thing I'll do here is point at the vertical divider, and when I see the two-headed arrow, I'm going to drag to the left. That way, I can see more of this time-phased grid. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to filter this to look at just the overallocated resources. Up in the ribbon in the Data section, where it says No Filter, click the down arrow and choose the Overallocated Resources filter. Now we can see that there are only two overallocated resources, construction and logistics. I can double-click these black triangles to expand and see the tasks assigned to these resources. Over in the time-phased grid, it becomes obvious where the overallocations come from. You can see in the summary rows, if a resource is overallocated, the text appears in red, both in the table and the specific time periods will be red if they're overallocated. The construction resource has two tasks that occur on the same day, and that's creating an overallocation. The same thing is happening with logistics. Now that we know where these problems are, let's go back to the Gantt chart. I'm going to click the top half of the Gantt chart button. So we're going to start with tasks 7 and 8. These are both assigned to construction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag over the IDs for both of those tasks to select both of them. Then I'm going to head to the Resource tab. And because I've selected those two tasks, I can tell Project to level those out. I do that by going to the Level section and clicking the Level Selection button. And when I do that, over in the time scale, I'll scroll over a little bit here, you can see that Project has pushed the Update Power task so that it occurs after Inspect Radiation Barriers. Also, notice that the Indicators column, those red people icons, have disappeared. We've gotten rid of that overallocation. Logistics is still overallocated. Now, another way that you can remove overallocations is if you have another resource, you can replace the overallocated resource with the other one. So I'm going to do that with Replace Desks. Let's use construction. I can do that right here in the table. So I can click the cell where it says logistics, click the down arrow. I'm going to turn off the checkbox for logistics and turn on the checkbox for construction. When I press enter, I've changed the resource and the overallocation indicators are gone. When you make a change like this, it's a good idea to remind yourself what you did. So I'm going to add a note to this task. I'm going to right-click, and on the shortcut menu down near the bottom, click Notes. That opens up the Task Information dialog box to the Notes tab. And I'm going to add a note. Replace logistics with construction to remove overallocations from the moving equipment task. And then I click OK. When I do that, now you can see that there's a note icon, and if I point at it, I can read the note so I know what I did. Those are a couple of easy ways to find and resolve overallocations.